Hello, my dear listeners. Welcome to the We Stories. Today I prepared three interesting stories for you. The first one is horror. The second one is intrigue, and the third one is detective. My English is not perfect yet, but I want to share interesting stories with you, bring your emotion and become better with you. So take your place, take your food, and let me tell you a new story. The first story, horror. The voice inside the wall. The first night I heard the voice, I honestly thought it was my neighbor. A quiet whisper, barely noticeable. But the second night, the voice said my name, Ryan. And that was the moment I realized something was terribly wrong. My name is Ryan Walker. 3 months ago, after my divorce, I moved into the cheapest apartment I could find in Chicago. Apartment 214. The place was old, really old. The hallway lights flickered constantly. The pipes made strange noises every night, and the walls were so thin. You could hear people coughing 3 rooms away. But honestly, I didn't care. At the point in my life, I just wanted silence. After the divorce, everything felt empty. I barely slept, barely ate. Most nights, I just sat alone in the dark watching random TV shows until morning. The apartment felt wrong from the beginning. Not depressing, not creepy, just wrong. Every time I entered the bedroom, I felt watched. At first, I ignored it. Stress can make your brain do strange things, at least. That's what I kept telling myself. Then came the whisper. The first time it happened, I woke up at exactly 2:47 a.m. I remember checking the clock because those numbers burned into my memory. 2:47 a.m. I heard something, a quiet sound, coming from the wall beside my bed. A voice. So quiet. I couldn't understand the words. I listened for a few seconds, then convinced myself it was just neighbors. And I went back to sleep. But the second night, it happened again. Same time, same whisper. Expect this time. The voice said my name. Ryan. I froze. The voice sounded close. Too close. Like somebody was standing inside the wall. And then I heard breathing. Slow. Heavy. Right behind the wall, and for the first time since moving there, I locked my bedroom door. But around 3 a.m., I heard 3 knocks from inside the wall. Knock, knock, knock. Then a whisper. Ryan, don't let him out. The next morning, I asked the landlord about the neighbors. And the moment I mentioned apartment 214, his face changed. Not dramatically, just enough to notice. Like he recognized something. He looked away and said, The apartment next to yours is empty. Then he walked away. Too quickly. That answer stayed in my head all day because if nobody lives there, Then who was whispering? That night I bought a voice recorder. Nothing expensive, just enough to leave recording overnight. I placed it beside the wall, turned it on, and went to bed. At 2:47 a.m., I woke up. No whisper, no knocking, just silence. Too much silence. Then I realized something. The recorder was gone. I jumped out of bed, started searching everywhere. Under the bed, closet, bathroom, nothing. Then I looked towards the wall and saw it. The recorder was standing upright. Pressed against the wall, I know I didn't leave it there. I picked it up, pressed play. At first, static, then breathing, slow, heavy, and then my voice. But not me speaking, me sleeping. You could hear my breathing, turning, moving, and then a whisper right beside the microphone. Open the wall. I stopped breathing because I never said it. Then the recording continued, and I heard footsteps inside my room, walking slowly toward my bed. Then my own sleeping voice said, "Who are you?" And another voice answered, "I've been waiting." That same day, I searched all the records of the building and found something strange. Every few years, apartment 214 had a missing person. 1989, 1996, 2008, 2019. Always the same apartment, always no explanation. And then I noticed something. Every missing person disappeared. Exactly after 47 days. I checked my calendar. I had moved in 46 days ago. That night, I bought a hammer because tomorrow I was opening the wall. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen, holding the hammer, looking at the bedroom door, waiting. 2:30 a.m. Nothing. 2:40. Nothing. 2:46. And then the whisper came. "Ryan." Not from the wall, from the bedroom. I walked inside. The room looked normal. Too normal. Then I had breathing. Inside the wall. Slow. Heavy. I raised the hammer and hit the wall. Bang! Again, bang! Again, bang! The drywall cracked. Dust exploded everywhere. And then the wall opened. There was space inside. Not pipes. Not wires. A hidden room. Small. Dark. And empty. Except there was a chair. And a tape recorder. Already playing. I stepped closer and heard a voice. My voice. But older. Except it said, "If you found this, leave now." Then the recording continued. My name is Ryan Walker. I stopped breathing because that was my name. The recording continued. I moved here 47 days ago. I thought the voice was in the wall. it isn't. It's inside the room. I turned around, nobody. Then the recorder said, "Don't turn around again." I froze. Then I felt it breathing right behind me. Warm, slow, and a whisper, "You finally opened the door." I ran. I don't remember leaving. I only remember waking up in the hospital. 3 days later, the police questioned me. I told them everything. They searched apartment 214. The wall was normal. No hidden room, no recorder, nothing. I moved out immediately. Weeks passed. Then, one evening, I got a voicemail. Unknown number. No text, only audio. I pressed play. Static. Then, a quiet, terrified voice. It said, "Hello, my name is Daniel. I just moved into apartment 214, and every night someone whispers my name." And then, very quietly, I heard my own voice whispering, "Don't open the wall." Oh yeah, this is end of this story. Write in the comments if you like this. And write in the comments, what do you think about this story? The second story. Intrigue. My daughter brought her friend home. My daughter brought her friend home on a Friday evening. And if I knew what that night would do to my life, I would have never opened the door. My name is Jensen Miller. I was 42 years old. I had a wife, a daughter, a house. And from the outside, I had the kind of life people respect. But inside that house, everything had been dying quietly for years. My wife's name was Laura. We had been married for almost 20 years. And she was not a bad woman. Not at all. She was kind, responsible, a good mother. But somewhere along the way, we stopped being husband and wife. We became roommates. We still had dinner together. We still talked about bills. We still smiled in family photos, but the love, the real love, was gone. At least that's what I told myself later, because people always need an excuse. When they are about to destroy everything, our daughter's name was Emily. She was 19, first year of college, smart, funny, and full of life. She still came home every weekend, and that Friday she brought Sophie. Sophie was 18, also a first year student. She walked into our house wearing a simple black jacket, holding a small bag over the shoulder. She smiled politely and said, "Nice to meet you, Mr. Mueller." And I remember thinking, she had very sad eyes. Not beautiful, not attractive. That came later. At first, I only noticed the sadness. During dinner, Emily talked non-stop. College stories, classes, new friends, everything. But every now and then, she would look at me. Not in a strange way. Not at first. Just long enough for me to notice. Then she would look away. After dinner, Emily and Laura went upstairs to look for old photo albums. Sophie stayed in the kitchen with me. I was washing dishes. She was standing near the counter, and, and for a few seconds, neither of us said anything. Then she asked, "Are you always this quiet?" I laughed. I laughed. What do you mean? She shrugged. I don't know, you seem like someone who has a lot to say but doesn't. That sentence hit me harder than it should have, because she was right. I did have a lot to say, I just hadn't had anyone ask in years. That was the first mistake. I answered her honestly. I guess people stop talking when they feel nobody is listening. Sophie looked at me for a long moment. That's sad. And I should have ended the conversation there. I should have smiled, walked away, remembered who I was: a husband, a father, a grown man. But I didn't. Instead, I asked, "Why do you sound like you understand it?" Sophie smiled. But it wasn't a happy smile. I think lonely people recognize each other. That was the moment something shifted. Nothing happened. No touch, no flirting, no secret message. Just a sentence. But somehow it stayed with me. Over the next few weeks, Sophie came over more often. At first, always with Emily. They studied together, watched movies, made dinner in our kitchen. But I noticed something. Sophie always found a reason to talk to me. A question about music, a comment about a book on my shelf. I joke when Laura wasn't in the room. And slowly I started waiting for those moments. I hated myself for it, but I waited anyway. One evening, Emily fell asleep on the couch during a movie. Laura had gone to bed earlier. Sophie and I were the only ones still awake. The room was dark. Only the TV was on. Blue light moved across her face. She looked at me and whispered, "Do you ever wish you could start over?" I should have said no. I should have said I loved my life. I should have said anything else, but I didn't. I looked at her and said, "Every day." She didn't answer. She just looked at me. And in that silence, I knew we had crossed a line. Not with our hands, not with our lips, but with something worse. With honestly. Because some betrayals begin long before anything physical happened. They begin when you let someone into the part of your heart where your family no longer lives. And Sophie had already entered mine. 2 weeks passed. Nothing happened. At least, nothing obvious. No message, no touching, no secrets, just conversation. And somehow that felt more dangerous, because conversation become habits, and habits become something else. Sophie started coming over more often. Sometimes Emily wasn't even home yet. And Sophie wouldn't sit in the kitchen and wait. We talked. Books, music, regrets, life. She asked questions nobody had asked me in a year. What did you want to become? What did you want to become? what would you change if nobody judged you? And I answered, too honestly. One evening she stayed late. Emily went upstairs to study. Laura was visiting her sister. Only Sophie and I stayed downstairs. She was sitting at the table. I was making coffee. And suddenly she said, "Can I ask you something weird?" I laughed. "Sure." She looked down, then said quietly, "Do you think people fell in love because they meet the right person? Or because they met someone at the wrong time?" I looked at her too long, then said, "I don't know." She smiled and quietly answered, "I think timing ruins more lives than love." That sentence stayed with me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of her. At least that's what I told myself. The next day, I received a message. Unknown contact. I opened it. It was Sophie. One sentence. "Thank you for listening yesterday." That should have been normal, but it wasn't, because she didn't have my number. And I never asked how she got it. After that, she started texting. At first, once a day, then every evening, and then all day. Nothing inappropriate. That's the scary part, because everything felt incensed until it didn't. Then one night she said, "Do you ever feel quietly for waiting another life? Do you ever feel guilty for wanting another life?" I started at the message for 10 minutes. Then I replied. Every day. She read it immediately, typing. Then, me too. 3 days later, everything changed. Emily left for classes. Laura went shopping. Sophie came over. She said they forgot something, but she stayed. We talked. Then silence. Then she stood up, walked closer, looked at me, and quietly said, "Tell me to leave." I should have. Instead, I didn't move. She stepped closer and kissed me. 1 second, maybe 2. Then I kissed her back. And that was the exact moment my life ended, because neither of us noticed it. Because neither of us noticed it. The front door opening, and Laura was standing there, watching, not angry, not screaming, just looking at us. Like she stopped recognizing who I was. Then she quietly said, "Emily is going to break," and walked upstairs. 10 minutes later, I heard my daughters crying. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Laura stood in the doorway. Sophie stepped back immediately. I remembered opening my mouth, but nothing came out. Because there was nothing to explain. Not after what she saw. Laura looked at me, not angry, not crying, just disappointed. Then she quietly said, "You could have told me you were unhappy. You could have told me you were unhappy." And she walked upstairs. Then I heard Emily, her voice, crying. I had never heard my daughters cry like that before. Sophie looked at me and whispered, "I should go. I should go." I didn't answer. She left. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't excitement anymore. This was damage. That night, nobody spoke. Laura slept in another room. Emily locked herself inside the bedroom. Emily locked herself inside her bedroom. I sat in the kitchen until morning, looking at my phone. At 1:17 a.m., message from Sophie. "I'm sorry." Then another. "I didn't plan this." Then, "I think I should disappear." I answered, "Don't." That was mistake number 2. That was mistake number 2. The next day, Emily came downstairs. She looked at me and asked one question. "Did you love her?" I should have said no. I should have said I made a mistake. But instead I stayed silent, and silence answered for me. Emily started crying. Then she said, "You didn't choose her. You choose yourself." Then she walked out. 2 days later, Laura asked for a separation. Emily stopped answering my calls, and somehow people found out. Neighbors, friends, people at work. Everybody suddenly knew. Nobody cared about details. Nobody cared the actual happened. All they saw was a father, a husband, and a line crossed. A month later, I moved out, and Sophie moved in with me. And this is part nobody expected. Nothing dramatic happened. No huge fights. No huge fights. No betrayal. No move ending. Just reality. Suddenly, there was no tension, no mystery, no secret, only normal life. Bills, laundry, breakfast, silence. And one evening, Sophie sat down across from me and said, "I need to tell you something." She looked nervous, then quietly said, "I think I confused being understood with being in love." I remembered laughing, not because it was funny, because my brain refused to understand. She kept talking. "You listened to me. You treated me like an adult. And I thought that feeling meant love. But I didn't think it was. 3 days later, she moved out. 6 months later, I saw her by accident. She was laughing, walking with some guy her age. She looked happy. She saw me, smiled politely, like we barely knew each other. Emily still doesn't talk to me. Laura remarried. The house was sold. And something, I watch old videos. Emily at 8 years old, jumping into my arms, Laura laughing in the kitchen, normal life, and every time I realized the same thing. I didn't lose my family because I fell in love. I lost my family because I stopped protecting what I already had. And some mistakes don't ruin your life immediately. They wait until you realized what you traded away. Don't ruin your life immediately. They wait until you realized what you traded away. Please write in the comments what do you think about this story. The third story, Detective. The murder at the birthday party. 24 people sang Happy Birthday! The second later, the birthday girl was dead. Nobody left the house, nobody broke in, and everyone inside became a suspect. My name is Noah Brooks, detective. 12 years of investigation, and I learned one thing: people rarely kill strangers. Most murders happen close, very close. The victim was Hannah Carter, 24 years old. No enemies, no criminal history, good job, good reputation. People described her the same way. Perfect. People described her the same way. Perfect. People described her the same way. Perfect. I never trust that word. Nobody is perfect. The birthday happened at her parents' house. Small party, family, close friends, her boyfriend Ethan, her younger sister Claire, and the several old friends. Everything looked normal. Cake, music, photos, but then at 8:43 p.m. the lights went out. 10 seconds, that's all. When electricity returned, Hannah was lying on the floor, dead. No screaming, no visible injury, no weapon, just shock. Guests reacted differently. The mother screamed, the father froze. Boyfriend dropped to his knees, friends started crying, and Claire, the sister, collapsed completely. Too completely. I didn't notice that immediately, but later I remembered. Doctor arrived. Initial report. No signs of violence. Possible poisoning. Poisoning inside a locked house. Possible poisoning. Poisoning inside a locked house. During a birthday with 24 witnesses. With 24 witnesses. That's when I knew this wasn't random. Someone planned this. We questioned everywhere, and almost immediately. Things stopped making sense. Boyfriend said they were planning to move in together. Then we found messages. They had been fighting. They were planning to move in together. Then we found messages. They had been fighting for weeks. Best friend said they were inseparable. Then we found emails. Business conflict. Money. Lies. Everybody loved Hannah until we started asking questions. Then I spoke with Claire. She looked destroyed, crying, hands shaking. She said, I don't understand who could do this. Then she asked, do you think she suffered? And that was strange, because we hadn't told anyone yet that Hannah was poisoned. I smiled and answered. We don't know yet. Claire nodded immediately, too quietly, too quickly. And that was the first moment I wrote her name in my notebook, not as a witness, as suspect. The next morning, I returned to the Carter house. Everybody looked different. That always happens after a murder. The masks disappear. The masks disappear. Yesterday they were family. Today they were suspect. The toxicology report arrived. Cause of death. Acute poisoning. Fast. Silent. Almost possible to notice immediately. Almost impossible to notice immediately. The poison was injected. The poison was injected, not swallowed. That changed everything. No cake, no drink. Someone got physically close to Hannah during those 10 seconds. I started with Ethan, the boyfriend, 25, calm, too calm. He said, "We had problems, but I loved her." I asked, "Then why were you searching apartment alone?" His face changed. He admitted they they were close to breaking up. Hannah became controlling, jealous, suspicious. Good motive, but not enough. Then came Megan, best friend. She cried until I showed her emails. Turn out, Hannah had launched a project using Megan's idea. Without credit, Megan looked at me and said, "She always won." Interesting sentence. Interesting sentence. Then I spoke with the parents. Mother said Hannah was perfect. Father stayed silent, too silent. Later, I asked him privately, "What are you not saying?" He looked away. Then quietly said, "Hannah and Claire stopped being close years ago. Now that was new." Everyone described them as inseparable. Father shook his head. Father Father shook his head. "No, Claire copied her." "Copied?" He nodded. "Same clothes, same music, same hair, same interests. At first, everyone thought it was admiration. At first, everyone thought it was admiration, but then it became uncomfortable. I requested Claire's phone records. Nothing. Clean. Too clean. Then we recorded the latest message, and there it was. Sounds of message. One contact. Ethan. But Ethan never answered. Almost never. Message after message. "Claire, do you think Hannah is lucky? Would you ever date someone like me?" "Claire, I think you understand me more than she does." Then one message from Ethan. Short, cold. "Claire, I love Hannah. You don't become someone by copying them." Then Claire answered, "I know, but she doesn't deserve you." I sat looking at the screen, then something clicked. Not jealousy. Not jealousy. Something deeper. Claire didn't want Ethan. Claire didn't want Ethan. Claire wanted Hannah's life. That evening, I returned to speak with Claire. She opened the door, red eyes. Exhausted. Then she asked, "Detective, did she die instantly?" And for the second time, she already knew details. Nobody had told her. That's when I knew. I wasn't talking to a grieving sister. I wasn't talking to a grieving sister. I was talking to someone who had been there. I asked Claire to come to the station. I asked Claire to come to the station. She agreed immediately. Too easily. She walked in wearing black. No makeup. Hair tied back. She looked exhausted. But not scared. I offered her water. I offered her water. I offered her water. She sat down. And before I asked anything, she said, "Did you find anything?" I smiled. Then said, "Tell me about your sister." She looked confused, then smiled. Then smiled sadly. "Hannah was perfect. Everybody loved her. Everything came easy." I nodded. Then asked, "And you?" She laughed quietly. "Nobody chooses a second daughter." Interesting. I opened a folder. Inside, printed message. Photos, records. I slid them towards her. She looked down, then froze. Message to Ethan. Her copied outfits. Search history. How to disappear from someone's shadows. How long does inject poison work? Claire stopped breathing, then quietly said, "So, you know." I leaned forward and said, "No, I understand." She looked up. I continued, You didn't want Ethan. You wanted to become Hannah." She looked away, then quietly whispered, "She took everything. Good grades, attention, friends, boyfriend, every room she entered. People looked at her. Nobody looked at me." Then she smiled, not angry, just tired, and said, "You know the funny part?" I nodded. She said, "I never hated her." Then, for the first time, she cried. She said, "I just wanted to be her." I didn't say anything. Then asked, "What happened that night?" Claire looked at the table, then started talking. Lights went out. Everybody laughed. She walked to Hannah, hugged her, said, "Happy birthday!" and while hugging, used a hidden injector. Small, fast. Nobody noticed it. Then she stepped away. 10 seconds later, Hannah collapsed. Claire looked at me, then asked, "Do you know what I thought would happen?" I stayed silent. She smiled sadly. "I thought people would finally notice me." She laughed, then whispered. But all anybody talked about was Hannah. She stood up, put her hands forward, and quietly said, "I am ready." 6 months later, I visited the cemetery, Hannah's grave. There were flowers and one letter, no signature, only one sentence. "I am sorry, I tried to become you instead of becoming myself." And for the first time, I realized sometimes murder doesn't begin with hate. Sometimes it begins with comparison. So, my dear listeners, what do you think about this story? Please tell me in the comments. So, thank you, my dear listeners, for spending this time with me. If you like this story, please like, subscribe, and I'm waiting for you tomorrow, because tomorrow you hear a new interesting stories. Thank you and have a good day. See you again soon, my dear listeners.